Thank you.
There we go. All right. So we are going to record. And actually, I am just going to share my screen so we can get started here. My apologies. Everything has taken me a little bit off guard, so it's taking me a minute to get back on track, but thank you so much for your patience, and hopefully we will see if Silvina or any others come into the room. So my presentation today is really about using simulations, and the focus is on fostering conversations related to D, E, and I, but in this case, I'm also focusing on inclusion and justice. And so just to introduce myself, I'm Debra Faszer-McMahon. I'm Dean of the School of Humanities and Professor of Spanish at Seton University. And one of my colleagues is here with us today, so welcome, Judith. And I was really excited about the theme of this conference because, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but during the pandemic, I think we all, really struggled to kind of figure out how to deal with COVID-19. But I think we also needed to face the twin pandemic of racial justice and inequality. And so thinking about that and how this conference might help us foster those conversations is really valuable. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of sort of my plan for today. I wanted to do a few introductions where we got to know some of the other people in this session. Then I wanted to talk just a little bit about some theory related to using simulations to foster conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then I wanted to spend most of our time giving you a simulation experience. We're going to use an online digital simulation called Parable of the Polygons. And then we'll do some reflection after the simulation, and we'll have an opportunity for people to converse in the target language using ACTFL's proficiency levels and kind of connecting this to how we might incorporate our own students. And then finally, just some time for reactions and questions and applying this to our own classroom context. So with that, we will go ahead and dive right in, and welcome for anyone who's adding. I know many of us are teaching all day today and are just able to sort of get online right now. So this is appropriate. We're going to start with sort of who we are in this group. So I'm going to ask if you would be willing to just type in the chat maybe what languages and levels you teach, how long you've been in the profession, and then if you're willing, one aspect of your identity that you think helps you as a teacher. So I'll give you just a minute so that you can type.
Okay, I think I got here. Hi.
Oh, wonderful. Silvina is here. Yes. Yay. Silvina, we just started and I am inviting people to type into the chat what languages and levels they teach, how long they've been in the profession, and an aspect of your identity that you think helps you as a teacher.
Debra, this is Edith.
Yes, Edith.
I've been working, I apologize to everyone. I've been trying to get onto this meeting for 25 minutes because I'm the host and I was supposed to be there way before you, and I was, but it didn't work for me.
Yeah, it didn't work for me either. So we apologize to everybody.
I do apologize, and I'm going to try to do my best to support you, Debra, and everybody who's there. Hi, Silvina.
Hi.
No problem. Thank you so much for being here. And I know I also was struggling to get on, and doing the conference online for the first time is always a bit of a challenge. So really appreciate your help.
Thank you for being resourceful, Debra.
Of course, no problem. And thank you. Silvina was the one who gave me Rich's cell phone number. So that's how we got in. So thank you, Sylvie.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Okay, so I'll give you just another minute or two if you want to type into the chat. It looks like I'm so excited. We have a range of languages represented. So we have German, Mandarin Chinese, Spanish, and hopefully some other languages as well. All right. So I'll just also introduce, I didn't put into the chat, but I teach Spanish at the college level at Seton University. I have been in the profession for a long time, actually more than, gosh, I've been teaching for more than 25 years, I think, teaching English and Spanish. I've been at Seton Hill for the last 15 years, but I did teach high school English and Spanish for several years when I first started my career. And one aspect of my identity that I think helps me as a teacher is that I actually do not find language learning easy. I find it really, really challenging. And it's sort of funny, my husband and I joke, he is a very natural language learner. Like he just has kind of a gift for language learning and it comes very easily to him, but it's really hard for me. But I feel like that actually makes me a much better teacher of languages because I really understand my students who might struggle with learning languages and how hard that process is for some people. So, okay, second question, my apologies. So who are our students? Again, I'm just wondering in the chat if you might be willing to tell me just homogeneous or diverse. When you think about your own student population, would you describe it as more homogeneous or more diverse? When you think about the teaching staff at your institution, is it more or less diverse than your student population? So just those, we'll start with just those first two questions. Is your student population homogeneous or diverse? And then your staff, is it more or less diverse than the student population? Fabulous. And then just while, if there's anyone else who wants to post while people are thinking, I wonder if someone might be willing to take themselves off of mute and just share what impact diversity or its lack might have in your district. Anyone willing to share about your own experience?
Sure, I will. I think that my camera's on. I think that in a mostly white setting, an impact would be the example of the month of February when the very few students who are Black have to take the full share of the responsibility to be Black during the month of February, really awkward and uncomfortable. And I would say at the university space, because it's so international and so diverse, there's much more richness in the classroom community because folks share from their backgrounds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I'm just thinking at my own institution, we are not particularly diverse, but we are much more diverse than the surrounding community. Like the town in the area where we live is much less diverse than the institution. And so that presents some challenges for our students, but I also think then our college environment is this, it is this great opportunity from students from the region to really experience some difference that they might not have encountered before. All right, so the last questions, oops. These are the most important, thinking about some of our motivations. So it's a little bit silly, but when you think about sitting through this Thursday late afternoon session on diversity, equity, and inclusion, what would you most readily compare it to? So you have 4 choices. You can be honest. I'm not going to be offended. You can just pick A, B, C, or D. Nobody wants an autumnal root canal? My goodness. So regardless of sort of what you pick, sometimes I think it can be really intimidating, like as teachers, especially in this pandemic, the COVID environment, like I think we're just, I feel personally so overwhelmed with just the day-to-day that like sometimes trying to be creative in my classroom or try new things feels really challenging. And I guess I'm thinking also though about the twin pandemics that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, where if we think about COVID-19 and the ways that our institutions, our communities, and even we ourselves stopped everything to make major structural changes in what we were doing and how we were doing it in order to protect our students and to be able to deal with this new environment. And the question I have is, we also kind of realized in the midst of that, the second pandemic is one of racial injustice and inequality, and yet how much energy and effort and funding and time are we investing in really looking carefully at structural changes related to those issues? And I think, at least in my case personally, and as well as thinking about my institution, we've spent a lot more time and money dealing with COVID, and have had a lot less space to deal with these other pressing issues. So I also, our keynote yesterday, who was amazing, Rebecca Blauwolf, if you did not have a chance to attend that, I really strongly encourage you to watch the video. She included a quote from Brene Brown, which I found really powerful, so I actually added it to my slides. But just thinking about that, we don't have to feel guilty about maybe what we're not doing or what we haven't done in the past, but rather being focused on being accountable and reaching for the future and what is better. All right, so thinking about the simulation that we're going to look at today, I wanted to give you a little background research and then a bunch of resources. So there's a lot of research out there about the important benefits of interactive simulations and the way that that increases student learning. But I think what's really interesting, so Vogel is one of the most often cited researchers on this topic. And an early study by Vogel really talks about how important the learning gains, how much more learning gains there can be with simulations versus kind of traditional, a range of traditional pedagogies, but that's only true if students are the ones directly navigating through the simulation. So if teachers are kind of leading the simulation and navigating through it, it does not have that impact. So I think that's really important, and I'm going to try to give you an opportunity to be the navigator today in a simulation. Another kind of backbone of theory looks at simulations and stories, particularly focused on cultural learning. And I chose a researcher who looked at this within medical context, because I teach a lot of medical Spanish, but also in that intercultural field. And I think it's really interesting to see how many other professional fields are incorporating simulations because they recognize its power for deep, long-term gains for professionals. And then finally, thinking about Reese and the idea that the empathy centers in the brain are like a muscle, like almost like any other muscle in our body, that unless we work those empathy centers, we really can't grow in this skill area. And so just like we think about our language learners as sort of having these linguistic muscles that we need to build through acquisition, I think the science of empathy can really be optimistic for us, that we can help our students become more mindful and empathetic. So we're going to jump now to a simulation called Parable of the Polygons. And in just a minute, I'm going to put that, that link in the chat, but I want to show it to you first so that you'll kind of have a sense of the simulation that you're going to be working on. So in this simulation, it's a playable post on the shape of society. And you'll notice that there are a range of languages that you can choose to play this. So you may want to start off in Spanish, but you also might want to choose German or French or Mandarin or Arabic, or a range of other languages that you might be familiar with. You can just select those. And the way that this works is you're getting to know these squares and these triangles, and you'll notice that every polygon has an expression. They're either kind of happy, which is the little smile, or they're like just sort of neutral, and then, or they're angry, which is their mouth open. And if they're like upset, the only way to make them happy again is to move them. And your goal is to kind of move these polygons until they're happy. So like if they're unhappy, Those are the only ones you can move. You can't move the ones that are already happy. They basically are unhappy when they aren't comfortable in their immediate neighborhood. And so really they are unhappy if, you know, only 1 out of 6 of their neighbors is like them, so they want to move somewhere. They're happy if 2 out of 6 is like them, and they're just kind of meh if everybody is like them. So, you know, it seems kind of harmless because every polygon would be happy if they were in a mixed neighborhood. So you wouldn't think that small bias would have a huge effect. But basically, we're going to try this simulation and see what happens. So I'm going to give you that link, and you're going to go in and start moving polygons until you make them happy. You want all of them to be happy. So you'll just drag and drop. And then once you're done with this board, you'll keep going down. The simulation goes on and shows you a range of other things. So you're going to want to keep moving through the full digital simulation. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy and paste this into the chat. And then if you want to click that link, and I'll give you about 6 minutes to move through the simulation. You'll just do that on your own, and then we'll talk about it a little bit. And let me know if you're having any trouble. If you're getting stuck in the simulation, feel free to send me a chat. Oh, I'm sorry, Christopher, can you not see the link? Oh, it must have gone, I apologize. I put the link in the chat. I just put it in again. Can you see it now?
We can see it now, Deborah.
Oh, okay. Oh, you know what? It must have gone directly to one of the session hosts. I apologize about that. Yeah, so if you want to click on the link and then I'll restart the time. If you are still working on the simulation, that's no problem. Go ahead and just keep working. If you are finished with the simulation, go ahead and just type done in the chat. That way I'll know kind of how people are doing. If you are still working, go ahead, that's just fine. If you're finished, take a look at some of the post-simulation reflections. We'll give people just a couple more minutes to finish the simulation, and then we'll talk about some of these questions. Okay, so just in the interest of time, even if you're not quite finished yet with this simulation, I'm going to call us back together, and I'm going to ask you if you would just type one word into the chat just to describe, if you could just pick one word to describe your reaction to the simulation, what would it be? So would anyone be willing to take themselves off mute and maybe expand just a little bit on the word that you picked or your reaction?
Debra, I chose frustration because it was never stopping. Whenever you think that you're solving an issue, 500 more, and the faces, it gets to a point that they are so annoying. You just want everybody to be happy, and it makes you realize how tricky it is. That sometimes, out of good willingness, you think that you are solving an issue and you are making it more complicated. Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else willing to share?
What surprised me a little bit is that the one that I finished, it seems that the blue squares, they seem to be tighter, and the yellow triangles, they float a little easier. It's like maybe the whiteness is out there easier to, typical round. And it seems that we segregate, we kind of cluster the, let's say, well, the diverse groups tighter. So they have to get tighter and tighter so they can protect each other. In a sense, maybe I'm digging too deeper into this, but that's the way mine looks, overall. And that's what I read from the visual.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, and I think like there's no right or wrong reaction to a simulation, right? It's just what you experienced about it. I want to call to mind kind of the first theorist that we talked about noted how important it is for simulations to really help foster deep learning. Students, it has to be self-directed and that they are navigating and generating the experience. And then that also means that you can't really control like the outcomes sometimes of what they get out of it. But that also means it's really powerful and you can help to draw out thoughtful discussion and connection. And so one of the ways that I would say, you could help your students connect through a simulation like this, which is looking at divisions in society. And obviously, we don't actually have polygons. So helping them to think about divisions or conflicts or tensions within maybe the school environment or the community, And then obviously nationally, internationally, I think there's lots of ways that you can connect. And so one of the things that I was hoping to do, we may not have enough time to really do it today, but was to kind of follow ACTFL's oral proficiency scale to sort of generate conversational questions for novice level learners, intermediate, advanced, and superior. So I'll sort of share that with you, and then we'll see if we have time to get to some of that. The other question I have for you is, do you think your students would be able to do a simulation like this in the target language? Why or why not? Anybody have a reaction about that? First of all, did anyone try it in a language other than English? You might not have today. You might want to have wanted to see it in English first. Any thoughts about whether your students could do this simulation in your target language?
I think in terms of the mechanics, I mean, it's just moving things around. I mean, you can give them the instructions in any language. You mean the discussion, correct? Not just obviously.
No, I actually mean the simulation itself. Could they?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
I would agree with you. I mean, I think you would have to prep them with some vocabulary and, you know, a little bit of vocabulary building. But the other way to think about it is you could do the simulation in English first and then have them do it in the target language, or vice versa. They could try it in the target language and then do it in English and see how their understanding and interpretation shifted. You know, there's other useful ways. You know, you could do some outside of class, some in class.
I would probably be more concerned how I do the discussion itself.
Yeah.
So to not, you know,
Yeah.
I don't know, just
So
with respect and yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. I'm really glad that you brought up that issue of discussion, because I do think having target language conversations about simulations, those are really hard because a lot of the deep issues that we're trying to get at, like how do we get to those with students who are kind of at the novice level or at the intermediate level, or, you know, a kind of struggle with expressing deep thoughts. So what I wanted to do was give you kind of a sample of how you might do that. And so this link, I'm also going to put this link in the chat, is just, these are 20 questions, basically starting with the novice level. And I do this in English. I also have a Spanish version just because that's my language, but obviously you could put these into any language. And like a few novice level questions that I think any level of students that you're working with, you know, with some really basic language in your target language, you know, they can talk about playing games, whether they like it or dislike it. They can name a favorite game, tell you what it's called. They can talk about who they like to play with. You know, whether alone or in groups, and then they can say what they thought about this simulation or this game. So like at the novice level, you can do some really basic things that are just about games, right? Can you also address some of the deeper issues? Yeah, but it's a little bit tougher. You probably need a little more intermediate level to be in the target language and discuss, you know, some of those larger issues. So a lot of descriptive practice here, describing favorite games, describing this particular simulation. And again, this could be any simulation. It wouldn't have to just be this one. You can think about how you could use these levels of questions. But then kind of transferring this to thinking about, you know, describing your school and talking about some of the divisions or conflicts in your school. And that kind of description, those are still really meaningful things that students can talk about at a pretty simple intermediate level. They can also describe their city or town, talk about why they do or do not like living there, and talk about some of the challenges or problems. Again, just description. They can talk about if they are interested in politics, and they can describe a political tension. Even at a very basic level. And then, you know, as your students become more advanced, you certainly can get more in detail about, like, while you were completing the simulation, what were you thinking? What were some of your reactions? have you participated in simulations in the past? So I'm going to go ahead and just in the chat, I'm going to post links to these discussion questions that you can use for this, or you can really use them to model for kind of any simulation. And I know we're very close on time. We got kind of a late start, but I also wanted to show you a range of other online resources. I only introduced you to one digital simulation today, but there's so many other online resources that I think can be really useful for the language classroom and for language teachers. I know Silvina has given me a bunch of these ideas, like she's used Immigration Nation quite a bit. I really like some of the cultural detective resources. Let me see here, the iCivics, the Global Game Jam, We Are Chicago. You can be a fictional resident of Chicago's South Side. So not all of these obviously have as many languages as Parable of the Polygons, where you have a really wide range, but some of these do come in multiple languages that you could try out and see what you think. So I put all of those links in the chat, and I will also post all of this information from the presentation to the PSMLA. And I know we're out of time, but I just wanted to see if there were any questions that you had for me. I'll go ahead and stop share, just if people have anything else that they wanted to ask or add.
Debra, I'm curious about the reaction of your students when they're playing this simulation. How do they feel? And have you been able to have different levels of students playing the same game?
Yes, so I will say I have used this simulation with novice level students, but I used it in English. They played the game in English, and then they interacted with the same game in a Spanish version after they'd already kind of seen it in English. And actually, I found that duplication helpful because some students don't quite get it the first time. It sort of takes them the second time through it, and they can capture more. And then also being very mindful about, depending on their level, their capacity to really discuss in depth is limited. So I'll often give opportunities for out of class responses that allow them to use their native language to have some of that deeper discussion. Because I think that's really important, at least for me in the modern language classroom. I want to maintain all Spanish all the time in the classroom space, but I also need them to be able to engage with critical global issues at a deep level. And so how do we do that? And I think that's sometimes challenging. And so I like to offer that variety. And I know some faculty really disagree with that, or some teachers, they're like, no, it has to be only Spanish all the time. But I think there can be a balance there where we're offering them a fully immersive environment and also encouraging them to communicate deeply about pressing social issues. And I'm sorry, I think the hosts have some things that they probably wanted to add. I've probably gone over time. I apologize.
That's okay. I apologize I could not get in the room. So thank you, Debra. Thank you so much. On behalf of PSMLA, we want to thank everyone for attending the session with Debra. We welcome and encourage your feedback on our sessions. Please use the link in the PDF program or found in the chat. Silvina, could you put the link for the evaluation form to give some feedback? The recording of the session, there was no recording, I believe, of the session because I was late starting, and I apologize again. I'm not sure what happened. As a reminder for teachers in PA, in order to qualify the session for Act 48 credit, you must complete the Act 48 reflection form. You can find the Act 48 form linked in the PDF program or in the chat. These forms should be completed within 72 hours of this session. Thank you. Thank you for being here with us, and enjoy the rest of our virtual conference. Thank you. Thank you, Debra. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And thank you.